Eamonn Holmes and Ruth Langsford looked rock solid for 14 whole years, the kind of couple everyone thought would last forever. They were the picture of stability, always side by side, smiling for the cameras and keeping things smooth in public. But then 2024 came crashing in, and everything just collapsed behind the scenes. Their marriage quietly crumbled, and soon enough they went their separate ways without much noise. Everyone thought that was the end of it, story closed, case done. But here's the twist. Since the split, it's mostly been Ruth's side running the show. Her version filled the headlines, shaped public opinion, and made people believe they knew what really happened. Meanwhile, Eamonn kept his mouth shut. No interviews, no clarifications, nothing. That silence made people assume he had nothing to say. But now at 66, Eamonn Holmes has finally broken that silence. And wow, what he's revealing is flipping the whole story upside down.
Do you notice anything different? Yeah? Ho, ho, ho.
It's changing how people see the breakup, and especially how Ruth Langsford looks in the aftermath. If you love stories like this, make sure to subscribe to Old Hollywood Archive for more deep dives into golf's greatest legends, epic rivalries, and real talk from the world of golf. So what did Eamonn Holmes actually say, and why did he stay quiet for so long before dropping his truth now? Let's break it all down. The rise, the silence, and the story no one ever really heard before. Long before all the tabloid drama, the public breakup, and those polished PR statements, Eamonn Holmes was just a Belfast kid with a big voice and an even bigger dream. Back then, he wasn't chasing fame, he was just learning how to command a room and make people listen. He started out at Holy Family Primary School, moved on to St. Malachy's College, and later hit the Dublin College of Business Studies. None of that screamed future TV star, but what it did show was grit, discipline, and a steady routine. That foundation became his secret weapon later on. Because when chaos hit the screen, when everything was unpredictable, messy, and live, Eamonn Holmes was the calm in the storm. He became the guy you could count on when everyone else was losing it. Eamonn Holmes got his first real break in 1979 when he stepped into Ulster television as a young presenter on Farming Ulster. It wasn't flashy or national fame, but it was the real deal, genuine broadcasting that toughened him up fast. There, he learned how to think quick, talk straight, and connect with people without putting on an act. Soon after, he slid into sports coverage, working shoulder to shoulder with experienced reporters and mastering live TV under real pressure. Every broadcast was a test, and he learned fast. No retakes, no safety net. By 1982, Ulster Television saw his grit and handed him the anchor seat on Good Evening Ulster. Taking over from Gloria Hunniford wasn't just a job, it was proof that Holmes had earned his place, one live broadcast at a time. Eamonn Holmes wasn't just reading scripts anymore, he was driving the conversation, setting the mood, and becoming a face everyone in Northern Ireland recognized. He didn't box himself into hard news either. He jumped into pageants, live specials, and big events, proving he could switch from serious to fun without losing an ounce of respect. By 1986, leaving Ulster Television wasn't just a career move, it was a major level up. He landed in Manchester with the BBC, joining Open Air on BBC One, and learning what it really meant to talk to millions, not just thousands. But the real game changer hit in 1993, when Holmes joined GMTV. He helped launch its very first broadcast, and morning TV, with all its pressure and chaos, would never be the same again. Live TV at sunrise is no joke. You're on air early, sharp and energetic, while the rest of the country's still half asleep. But Eamonn Holmes owned that space. He became the familiar voice people trusted to start their day, always calm, warm, and ready, no matter the chaos behind the cameras. Even when things got messy, like his very public clash with Anthea Turner, he stayed focused and solid in his spot. When he finally walked away from GMTV in 2005, he didn't slip out quietly, he spoke up. Holmes called out how the show had lost its edge, turning into celebrity gossip instead of real news. That blunt honesty stuck with him, and just 6 months later, Sky News handed him the Sunrise chair. Once again, he found his groove. Early mornings, new co-hosts, but always that steady, relatable vibe viewers couldn't get enough of. Eamonn Holmes turned into one of TV's most adaptable hosts, from snooker and darts, to horse racing, tennis, quiz shows, and even faith programs like Songs of Praise. He wasn't chasing fancy titles, he was chasing consistency. When he joined This Morning in 2006, he doubled down on what he did best, making live TV feel spontaneous but steady, real but reliable. That style hit its peak when he started presenting beside Ruth Langsford. Together they had this effortless chemistry, warm, believable, and natural on screen. They fronted shows like Gift Wrapped and Eamonn and Ruth, How the Other Half Lives, turning their real-life marriage into a TV brand that just worked. For audiences, watching them felt comfortable, like tuning into a couple who truly belonged on screen together. Eamonn Holmes' TV image became part of who he was. The public saw him as one with the screen. But behind the fame, the industry was shifting fast. In 2020, he faced a major hit when he lost a tribunal case over his freelance status under IR35 rules, forcing him to publicly defend not just his paycheck, but his worth. He boldly called himself one of the best live presenters in the country, and whether people agreed or not, that self-belief was loud and clear. Radio, though, that was his real comfort zone. From downtown radio in the late 80s to Radio 5 Live, Magic 105.4, Radio 2, and later talk radio, he used the mic to open up. It was his unfiltered space, longer talks, deeper takes, less polish. On radio, listeners didn't just hear a presenter, they heard Eamonn Holmes for who he truly was. By 2022, Eamonn Holmes had jumped to GB News, kicking off a breakfast show with Isabel Webster. He called it a space where he finally felt valued again, where real journalism mattered, and where bending the rules a little made every conversation feel alive. After years of being the steady one, the dependable face who rarely revealed much, Holmes is speaking out again, this time not as a presenter reading headlines, but as a man finally stepping out from behind them. And when he talks now, the story doesn't move forward, it rewinds. Back to the part of his life that stayed hidden for years, before the fame, before the gossip, before he ever had to explain a thing. The private love story of Eamonn and Ruth, one that seemed unbreakable, but in the glare of the spotlight, simply couldn't last. Eamonn and Ruth's love story didn't start as some made-for-TV romance or a publicity stunt meant to charm viewers. It began softly, with patience and purpose, at a time when timing and respect meant more than big gestures. When Eamonn Holmes met Ruth Langsford in 1997 through their mutual friend Sally Mean, there was no rush, no headlines, just two people figuring things out quietly. Eamonn had separated from his first wife Gabrielle 2 years earlier, and both he and Ruth agreed early on to keep their relationship private, not to hide, but to protect what they were building. That decision, made long before cameras followed their every move, set the tone for everything that came after, steady, mature, and away from the noise at least for a while. When they finally started dating, Eamonn and Ruth kept their relationship completely out of the spotlight. No red carpets, no magazine deals, nothing. Years later, Ruth shared how that privacy actually deepened her love for him. She said it showed the kind of man Eamonn truly was, grounded, loyal, and protective, the kind of person who valued integrity over attention. Instead of feeling hidden, Ruth said she felt safe, like she was with someone who cared more about what was real than what was public. 2 quiet years passed before they finally went public, but by then, their bond was already unshakable. Life moved fast after that, and in 2002 they welcomed their son Jack, a moment that completely shifted their world and turned their partnership into something even deeper. Ruth Langsford once shared that she found out she was pregnant just a day before her godson Charlie's christening, a moment that caught her completely by surprise. Eamonn was away at the time, so she confided in her best friend Sam, Charlie's mom, first. It was a quiet, deeply personal moment between 2 close friends, the kind of life event that doesn't need an audience to feel huge. Ruth later called it a very special moment, even though Eamonn wasn't there to hear the news in person. By 2006 though, their worlds, both private and professional, started to merge completely. 9 years into their relationship, Eamonn joined Ruth on the Friday edition of This Morning. Ruth was already a familiar face, having been part of the show since 1999, quietly earning her place as its longest-serving and most trusted presenter. Working side by side on TV wasn't all smooth sailing, and Ruth Langsford never pretended it was. She openly admitted that working with your partner can be tricky, even if they made it look easy most of the time. Over the years though, Eamonn and Ruth turned into one of daytime TV's most recognizable duos, hosting hits like Gift Wrapped, How the Other Half Lives, Lose a Stone in 4 Weeks, Eamonn and Ruth's 7-Year Itch, and Do the Right Thing. Their chemistry became their signature, that natural back and forth that blurred the line between marriage and brand. Viewers didn't just watch them, they felt like they knew them. Eamonn even joked once that quitting TV wasn't an option because, as he put it, the audience just wouldn't stand for it. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. At the time, Eamonn's playful comments about their bond sounded lighthearted, but looking back, they carried a weight neither of them fully grasped. 13 years after they first met, and 5 years after Eamonn's divorce from Gabrielle was finalized, the couple finally tied the knot at Elvetham Hall in Hampshire. Soon after, they settled into a stunning 6-bedroom home in Weybridge, Surrey, reportedly worth £3.2 million. It seemed like everything had finally fallen into place: love, success, and real stability. Years later, while appearing on Strictly Come Dancing, Ruth spoke openly about their marriage, calling it one built on deep understanding and mutual respect. She said Eamonn was always the first to tease her, but just as quickly the first to surprise her with a thoughtful gesture, even when she was buried in the chaos of competition life. Ruth had always trusted that Eamonn truly understood her. That deep connection, she believed, was what made them work so well. But then came 2020, and everything shifted fast. In November, both Eamonn and Ruth were suddenly dropped from This Morning, replaced by Alison Hammond and Dermot O'Leary, a decision that reportedly left them both furious and blindsided. Professionally, it was a heavy hit, but personally, it marked the start of a real divide. Ruth stayed with ITV, continuing to shine on loose women, while Eamonn took a sharp turn, joining GB News to host a breakfast show. For the first time in years, their careers were heading in completely different directions, and that growing distance between them started to feel deeper than just work. It was something neither could easily ignore. By May 2024, the silence finally shattered. Eamonn Holmes and Ruth Langsford confirmed that their marriage was officially over and that divorce proceedings had begun. Their spokesperson kept things polished, saying that busy work commitments had simply pulled them in different directions. The statement was calm, tidy, and perfectly worded, the kind meant to keep headlines gentle. They promised to stay friends, to keep things civil, and even teased a proper statement for their fans. But behind that polite message was the quiet end of a marriage once built on patience, privacy, and shared goals. And behind that ending, there was something heavier, something unspoken, hinting that maybe the cracks had been forming long before the cameras stopped rolling. Something had been quietly wearing them down long before the marriage finally collapsed. Because while the split was dressed up in calm, professional statements, the truth ran much deeper. The pressure had been building for years, and it was coming from a place Eamonn Holmes couldn't escape, his own body. The pain didn't stop when the cameras did, it followed him everywhere. For years, audiences saw his strength, his composure, his steady charm on screen. But what they didn't see was how much of that strength was borrowed. Behind the confident voice was a man in constant pain, battling a body that was slowly breaking down piece by piece. And through it all, Ruth Langsford stood beside him, steady, supportive, and hopeful, determined to help him hold it all together. Now, as Eamonn Holmes faces life on his own, those years of illness don't feel like background noise anymore. They feel like the breaking point where everything quietly began to shift. He never hid his health battles. He spoke about them openly, sometimes with dry humor, other times with raw honesty that hit hard. Even before his marriage started falling apart, his body had already been through a war. Years of severe pain finally led to a double hip replacement in 2016, a grueling 3-hour operation after enduring constant discomfort for far too long. At the time, Eamonn compared the surgery to doing live TV, saying he felt the same nerves before it started, but once it began, there was only focus, calm, and the hope that this time, things might finally get better. Eamonn even recalled the strange night before his surgery, when people started giving him emotional tributes, almost like a farewell, even though he wasn't going anywhere. When he woke up afterward to see his surgeon smiling, Ruth by his side, and a lunch menu waiting, he joked that it must mean he was still alive. That quick humor, that instinct to laugh through pain, became one of his trademarks, even when things got rough. Then came 2018, a year that should have been all joy. On the very day of his son Declan's wedding, Eamonn was struck down by shingles, a brutal blow that left his face swollen and unrecognizable. What should have been a proud family milestone turned into one of his hardest days. Years later, during an appearance on Loose Women, he opened up about just how much that moment shook him. Eamonn didn't hold back when he spoke about that nightmare. He even showed photos of himself during the worst of it, raw, unfiltered, and hard to look at. He explained that shingles hides inside most adults, waiting to strike without warning, and when it hit him, it hit hard. Staring at the pictures, he compared himself to Quasimodo, admitting he could barely recognize his own face. But it was 2021 that brought his toughest battle yet. Out of nowhere, he developed intense back pain that wouldn't let up. It got worse fast, until he was forced to rely on a walking stick just to get around. Then came the discovery that changed everything: 3 slipped discs pressing on the nerves in his right leg. Finally, there was an explanation for the agony, but no real relief in sight. By the end of that year, Eamonn Holmes finally admitted just how much his condition had worn him down, not only physically, but emotionally, and for his whole family too. He revealed there were days he couldn't even walk, couldn't bend, couldn't manage simple things, and had to depend completely on Ruth for help. He even confessed that his son sometimes felt embarrassed watching him struggle to move, a heartbreak that cut deeper than the pain itself. Scans showed the truth. Those slip discs were pressing hard, but Eamonn still held on to hope it might somehow fix itself. Sadly, it didn't. Epidural injections brought temporary relief, but not enough to give him his life back. His world got smaller, movement harder, and the dream of a quick surgery faded fast when doctors told him the situation was more complicated. Other spinal and nerve problems had to be dealt with first. Eamonn Holmes admitted he was devastated. After spending more than a year in unbearable pain, all he wanted was an answer, a way out. In September 2022, he stepped back from his GB News show to undergo major spinal surgery, hoping it would finally turn things around. But instead of relief, it opened the door to an even tougher reality. Despite months of intense physiotherapy, his mobility stayed limited, and every small task became a challenge. He spoke honestly about how humiliating it felt to rely on others just to get through the day. Even sitting still after physio filled him with guilt, like resting itself was another kind of failure. To make things worse, the surgery weakened his left leg, and just 2 weeks into recovery, tragedy struck. Eamonn fell backwards down 18 stairs at his Weybridge home, crashing onto the stone floor below, a fall that changed everything all over again. That fall could have ended everything. It was that serious. Somehow, Eamonn Holmes survived, but he came away with a broken shoulder and even more damage to his already fragile legs. He later admitted the fracture was a crushing setback, forcing him to take more time off work and once again face the harsh truth about his limits. But even then, he refused to quit. A full year after his spinal surgery, in September 2023, Eamonn went through another grueling procedure, a spine and neck stretching treatment, but the progress was painfully slow. He admitted he still couldn't walk properly, couldn't run, couldn't even do much beyond sitting and watching TV. It wasn't the recovery he'd hoped for, not even close. By 2024, his entire world had narrowed down to one goal: healing, no matter how long it took. Daily physiotherapy became Eamonn's new normal, every movement a battle, every step earned through sheer determination. A cane or wheelchair became part of his routine, and while Ruth stood by him publicly, she quietly admitted that something between them had shifted. She spoke honestly about acceptance, that maybe he'd never be 100% again. Ruth said she still lived in hope, but she also knew how exhausting long-term care could be, even for the strongest couples. Now, with their marriage over, those words sound heartbreakingly different. What once felt like strength now echoes with quiet surrender. And then came the call Ruth wasn't meant to hear, the moment everything between them truly broke. For months, the end of Eamonn Holmes and Ruth Langsford's marriage had been explained away with polished lines: health struggles, busy careers, two people growing apart. But behind that calm front, the real story was far more raw. On the surface, the split sounded calm and reasonable, but behind closed doors, it was anything but. The real ending didn't creep in slowly, it hit like a bomb. One devastating moment Ruth was never supposed to hear. And once she did, everything that was holding them together crumbled instantly. According to reports, the turning point came when Ruth made a shocking discovery inside their Surrey home. Eamonn thought he was alone, relaxed, and unobserved while chatting on the phone, unaware Ruth was still in the house. But she overheard the call, and what she heard wasn't harmless small talk. It was described as intimate, warm, and far too personal. The realization reportedly left Ruth shaken. She confronted Eamonn on the spot, and that single confrontation changed everything, leaving them both stunned by how far things had fallen. Eamonn reportedly had no clue Ruth was even in the house, but by the time he realized she'd been there all along, it was far too late. For Ruth, the moment hit brutally hard because of everything that came before it. Years of loyalty, sleepless nights, and total devotion through his surgeries, pain, and limited mobility. She had stood by him when his world was falling apart, caring for him when he couldn't even stand on his own. So to overhear him sharing intimate words with another woman wasn't just painful, it was a deep betrayal, one that cut straight through all the love and patience she had given. It felt like a gut punch after everything she'd sacrificed. And the worst part, that call wasn't the end. Sources say that after the confrontation, the marriage didn't crumble instantly. It just started to quietly fall apart, piece by painful piece. The marriage carried on for a short while, bruised, shaky, and barely holding together. But just weeks later, Ruth reportedly made another heartbreaking discovery, and this time, it wasn't something she overheard. It was messages found on Eamonn's laptop. According to insiders, that moment shattered whatever fragile hope was left. It was described as the final straw, the one that broke everything for good. The timing was key. The tense phone call confrontation happened in April, and the laptop discovery followed only weeks later. After that, there was no coming back. Soon, the public statement was released, calm, polite, and perfectly worded, confirming that Eamonn Holmes and Ruth Langsford's marriage was over, and that they were officially in the process of divorcing. Behind that measured tone, though, was a heartbreak far messier than the world was ever meant to see. No explanations, no tears, just a cold, clean ending after 27 years together. Fans were left stunned when the announcement dropped. 14 years of marriage, nearly 3 decades as a couple, gone in an instant. Not long after the separation went public, Eamonn Holmes moved on and confirmed his new relationship with Katie Alexander, while Ruth chose a completely different path. She stayed single, focusing on herself, her close circle of friends, and slowly rebuilding her peace away from the spotlight. She even marked her birthday with a quiet girls' trip, a sign she was finally starting to heal. For months, Ruth stayed silent, letting speculation swirl, but eventually she broke that silence in her first interview since the split, opening up about what she called a difficult and deeply painful breakup that changed everything she thought she knew about love and trust. Ruth spoke honestly about how tough it was to face the end of a marriage and a relationship that had shaped most of her adult life. But there was no bitterness in her voice, just quiet strength. She said that when any relationship falls apart, whether it's a marriage or a friendship, you hit a crossroads. You either let it break you or you stand up and move forward. And she made her choice. She moved forward. Ruth admitted she wasn't happy about the marriage ending, but she had made peace with it. That acceptance, she said, gave her freedom. The freedom to rediscover herself, to make choices that were about her and no one else. No more holding things together, no more bending to make it work, just focusing on her own life and her 22-year-old son Jack, who remains the strongest bond between her and Eamonn. Ruth spoke with a calm honesty that only comes from experience. She opened up about how hard it is to go through a divorce when the whole world is watching. Breakups are painful enough in private, she explained, but when every step is picked apart by strangers, it hits differently. She admitted that constant scrutiny is part of the job, and if you can't handle it, maybe you're in the wrong line of work. When the topic shifted to being alone again, Ruth didn't sugarcoat it. She said she's comfortable on her own, but not forever. There's a big difference, she explained, between enjoying a quiet weekend by yourself and realizing that every weekend might look like that now. That reality takes time to adjust to, and she's still figuring it out. But while Ruth was busy finding her balance and peace, things were quietly taking a very different turn on Eamonn Holmes' side. While Ruth was learning to move forward, Eamonn Holmes found himself pulled in the opposite direction, not chasing the future, but replaying the past. There was no anger in it, no blame, just quiet reflection, the kind that only comes when the dust has finally settled. Almost 2 years after his marriage to Ruth Langsford ended, he's finally opening up about what still lingers: regret. It's not the loud, dramatic kind, it's the quiet kind, the one that sits heavy when you realize there's no going back. In a new interview, Eamonn admitted he's been reflecting deeply on the life he built, the choices he made, and the moments he wishes he could do differently. After decades of being the voice of confidence and control, Holmes now sounds softer, more human, like a man finally ready to face everything he once kept hidden behind the camera. And then there's the part that slipped away with everything else. Eamonn Holmes admitted that if he could turn back time, he'd do one thing differently: find a better balance between his career and his personal life. No drama, no scandal, no excuses, just one honest line that says more than a full interview ever could. When asked directly about his biggest regret, he left the question hanging. No answer, just silence. And sometimes that silence says everything. Eamonn and Ruth, who spent years co-presenting This Morning, officially announced their separation in March 2024 after 14 years of marriage. But their story ran much deeper, stretching all the way back to the mid-1990s and building a life that included one son, now 23. For decades they were inseparable, partners in work, in love, and in the spotlight, until it all quietly came undone. So when their split finally happened, it hit harder than just a breakup. It felt like the closing of a whole chapter in British TV history. Since then, both have gone their separate ways, carving out completely different paths. Eamonn Holmes began dating relationship counselor Katie Alexander, while Ruth Langsford chose independence instead, focusing on herself and learning to stand tall again. She's been honest about how tough it was at first, how everything felt dark, uncertain, and overwhelming. But as time passed, the fear began to fade, and something new took its place: confidence, calm, and even a spark of excitement. Ruth said she hasn't sworn off love or marriage, but she's not chasing it either. The real revelation, she explained, was discovering just how strong and capable she truly is: independent, grounded, and finally at peace in her own space. What once felt terrifying for Ruth now feels like a new beginning, an open chapter instead of an empty space. But while she was rebuilding her strength, Eamonn's body continued to turn against him. After the separation, he faced even more medical battles, major spinal surgery, and a double hip replacement after years of relentless back pain that refused to let up. He admitted that the year had been brutal, saying he couldn't wait to leave it behind. But publicly, he also opened up about something even tougher: the reality that he had been effectively disabled for more than a year, depending on carers for even basic tasks. Eamonn called the experience both humiliating and humbling. Yet even in all that pain, he showed gratitude, thankful for the support, but painfully aware of how much life had changed. Ruth, on the other hand, turned inward. After the separation, she started therapy, and she's still committed to it today. She's spoken openly about how grounding it's been, describing those sessions as a safe space, free of judgment, assumptions, or history, just honesty. Someone to listen, someone to ask the hard questions, and someone to help her understand why certain moments still hit so deeply. She admitted that even though she's always been self-aware, therapy has helped her process everything with more peace and clarity. And while she's been healing personally, her professional life has only climbed higher. Ruth's career has flourished. She's steady, confident, and even teased fans with the idea of returning to This Morning. When asked about possibly hosting with Rylan Clark, she didn't even pause. If they asked, she said, "I'd say yes, especially with Rylan." Ruth affectionately described Rylan as her TV son, someone she adores and shares an effortless on-screen rhythm with. It's clear that door isn't closed, and her energy feels lighter these days. There have even been a few playful moments too. During a loose women chat about former Prime Minister David Cameron's health, fellow panelist Mylene Klass joked that men live longer when they're married, but women live longer when they're not. Ruth's comeback was instant and perfectly timed. "Good to know," she quipped, sparking laughter from the audience. It was short, witty, and sharp enough to hit its mark. And despite all the heartbreak, it seems the bond between her and Eamonn hasn't completely disappeared. Over Christmas, he reportedly reached out to her, sending warm wishes, expressing continued respect, and even speaking kindly of her at a festive awards dinner, showing that maybe, just maybe, there's still mutual care beneath all the history. Eamonn kept it simple but meaningful when he said Ruth deserved happiness. The words were few, but the timing made them powerful, proof that even in the middle of divorce proceedings there was still a touch of grace between them. That same Christmas, Eamonn spent the holidays with Katie at a luxury cottage in North Yorkshire, quietly embracing his new chapter while staying open about what lay ahead. Still moving with the help of a walking frame, he admitted that mobility was an everyday struggle, but he hasn't lost his drive. Eamonn shared his goal of improving by 2026 and revealed he's even looking into pioneering stem cell treatment. The determination is still there, burning through every setback. And so, this chapter doesn't close with bitterness, but with reflection. A man finally looking back, recognizing his missteps and admitting the cost of losing balance between love and ambition. A woman stepping forward, finding her strength, and a man looking back, learning from his past. Two lives that once ran side by side, now move in completely different directions. No drama, no explosions, just the quiet weight of everything that can't be undone. If you love stories like this, make sure to subscribe to Old Hollywood Archive for more deep dives into golf's greatest legends, epic rivalries, and real talk from the world of golf. So what do you think about everything that unfolded between Eamonn and Ruth? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Plus, check out the next video on your screen, you won't want to miss it.